Hello students, welcome to Notebook. You might have heard that the Indian Constitution is the longest in the world. At present, it has a preamble, 22 parts with 448 articles, 12 schedules, 5 appendices and 115 amendments. How did this constitution first come into being? It was framed between December 1946 and November 1949. Its draft was discussed clause by clause in the Constituent Assembly of India. The Constituent Assembly met for 11 sessions over a period of 165 days to discuss, draft and revise the Constitution. Various committees and subcommittees were formed for this purpose. India was forming an independent, sovereign government for the first time after hundreds of years of British rule. The country was still recovering from the trauma of partition. So, framing the constitution was a sensitive act which entailed a huge sense of responsibility. The constitution aimed to be true to the diversity and complexity of Indian society, to serve the interests of all communities and to address the wounds of partition and communal disturbances. Here is a brief look at the many problems India was facing as a new nation. The Congress and the Muslim League had failed to settle their differences, resulting in the partition of India. However, the Muslims and the Hindus had shown great unity in non-violent movements organized by Mahatma Gandhi, in armed struggles conducted by Subhash Chandra Bose, and in independent peasants and workers' uprisings across the country. The uprising of the Indian Royal Navy in Bombay and other cities in the spring of 1946 also drew much support from the common people. Indians rejoiced on the eve of independence, but their joy was not unanimous. The Muslims in India and the Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan faced death threats and loss of livelihood if they did not migrate immediately. Millions of refugees moved across borders. Muslim refugees migrated to East and West Pakistan, and Hindus and Sikhs arrived in West Bengal and Eastern Punjab. How did the new Indian government accommodate these refugees from the other side of the border? What was the status of these refugees in the decades after the partition? Try and find out the answers to these broad questions. Discuss your observations with friends. The Constituent Assembly also had to think about the fate of the princely states in a new nation. Independent Nawabs and Rajas used to rule almost one-third of the subcontinent under British rule. The Nawabs and Maharajas of these princely states began to dream of independent power in a free India. The Constituent Assembly discussed and debated all these problems while it drafted the Constitution. How were the members of the Constituent Assembly selected? They were not selected on the basis of universal franchise. The representatives of the Constituent Assembly were chosen by provincial legislatures in the 1945 to 46 elections. Like in the 1937 provincial elections, where only 10 to 12% of the adult population of India had the right to vote, Congress emerged as the victorious party in these elections. That is, the 1946 elections as well. The Muslim League won most of the reserved Muslim seats, but they refused to be part of the Constituent Assembly. They pushed their demand for Pakistan with a separate constitution. The members of the Congress were also divided in their opinions about the Constituent Assembly and about several other factors. The socialists within the party, like the communist member Somnath Lahiri, thought that the Constituent Assembly was a British construct. It was still controlled and influenced by British imperial powers. The fears of the socialists were not unfounded. When the Assembly started framing the Constitution in 1946, the British had not still left India. The interim government, headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, could only operate under the directions of the Viceroy and the British government in London. The discussions within the Constituent Assembly were also shaped by public opinions and demands. The Assembly needed to protect the right of the linguistic minorities and the lower castes, with special safeguards and seat reservations. Within the Congress, there were socialists and conservatives and secularists and members who were close to communal parties. They debated and settled their differences in view of the common good, that is, the national movement to build a free nation. The Constituent Assembly had 300 members, but 6 of them played particularly important roles. 3 of them were the representatives of the Congress: Nehru, Patel, and Prasad. Jawaharlal Nehru moved the Objectives Resolution, which forms the basis of the Indian political system. He also pushed the resolution which proposed the current design of the Indian national flag. Vallabhbhai Patel drafted several important reports and worked as a mediator, reconciling different points of view within the Assembly. Rajendra Prasad, the President of the Assembly, ensured that discussions in the Assembly were constructive and that everyone had a chance to speak. The lawyer and economist B.R. Ambedkar, who was the champion of the rights of the untouchables or Dalits of Indian society, had an important role in the Constituent Assembly. He was previously opposed to the workings of the Congress, but had later joined the Union Cabinet as Law Minister at Gandhi's request. Gandhi, as you know, also tried to secure social justice for the untouchables or the Harijans. Ambedkar served as the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution. 2 other lawyers, K. M. Munshi from Gujarat and Aladdi Krishnaswamy Iyer from Madras, also served with Ambedkar and guided the drafting of the Constitution over a period of 3 years. These 6 members of the Assembly received significant help from the civil servants B.N. Rao, constitutional advisor to the Government of India, and the chief draftsman S.N. Mukherjee. Rao prepared a series of background papers by closely studying and researching the political systems of other countries. S.N. Mukherjee expressed complex proposals in clear legal language. What were and still are the main tenets of the Indian Constitution? Were the members of the Assembly inspired or influenced by the constitutions of other countries while drafting the Indian Constitution? We will find the answers to these questions in our next video. Till then, happy learning.